We recently celebrated our 5-year anniversary here at the Art of SBA Lending. That's 5 years of providing unfiltered, expert advice to small business lenders, and that's earned us a lot of trust with our listeners, so much so that they call me for career advice. Now, I know there's also a lot of leaders throughout the SBA industry who are constantly looking to source great talent, and that's why we created SBA Jobs Board. SBA Jobs Board connects hiring managers of the SBA industry who are actively searching for their next great hire with my highly engaged audience of SBA lending pros. The SBA Jobs Board is live right now on artofsba.com. If you're a hiring manager, you can go in and post a job for just $99. If you're listening to this and you're ready to start the next chapter in your career, go check out the available positions. Visit artofsba.com for more information. Hello and welcome back to the Art of SBA Lending. We got a hot one today. Brent Ciurlino is on the podcast. Brent is Chief Operating and Risk Officer at Velocity SBA. I actually met Brent in the early days of ReadyCap when we were applying for PLP status. Now, in short, Brent is a risk guy, and he's not afraid of a challenge. Exhibit A, he went back to work for FDIC in 2009. Where he ended up taking over a bank, none other than Temecula Valley Bank, a big player in the SBA space at the time. And from there, he transitioned to SBA, Okram to be exact, the SBA's regulatory arm, where he invented the Paris score. Now, I didn't know any of this, by the way, when I asked him to be on my podcast. So this was all fascinating to me. One more thing. Remember the whole BankServe situation that unfolded after Newtek had acquired them? Well, Brent was tapped by the CEO of Newtek to help navigate that situation as well. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why he is known in some circles as the Fixer. So without further ado, here's my interview with Brent. With all the demand for SBA skilled people, why in the world would any SBA professional who's worth their salt need a recruiter to help them land a job? Well, do Tom Brady and Michael Jordan have agents? Exactly. The truth is, the value of a vested partner in your success, someone who will work to learn your story, your priorities, and your values, is immeasurable. The team at Baker Lewis has over 30 years experience helping SBA professionals think strategically about how to make the best move possible, and helping SBA lenders think strategically about how to build their teams. In the last quarter alone, Baker Lewis has helped a new SBA lender staff and launch its small loan program, helped the number one BDO at a top 10 shop find a new home and get a great deal, by the way, and placed a junior servicer and more. Look, we're in a bit of a wonky market. It's easy to make a mistake. You can't rush this stuff. This is your career. These are your people. Schedule a call with Baker Lewis today and begin the process of finding the best possible opportunity for you. We'll leave a link in the show notes. Look at this, by the way. It's about to get super nice out.
Yeah,
the shadows are starting to come
and
in.
everything. So one of my biggest memories of Vegas, aside from my younger versions, because my family was big in Atlantic City. So when I was younger, I used to come out here because all the Italians, I have a bunch of cousins that are dealers and pit bosses and all that, and they work between here and there. The spring of 2009, when I came out here, I spent New Year's here in 2009 to 10, and it was like a ghost city because I'd come to the FDIC and the whole place, the real estate development just crashed. Yeah, bad. I mean, like, I remember this one development over by the airport. It must have been 250 houses constructed, various stages of construction, but all framed in, totally empty.
Amazing. And they came back hard. You should have bought some of those houses.
Yeah, yes, should have. Unfortunately, that was been an ethics violation.
Yeah. Ethics is important, I guess, when you're working in the government, yes. FDIC.
But
and regular business for the record.
And I'm going to say something. I don't know if it was Aria. It was either one of the resident buildings attached to one of these hotels was still kind of empty. And these guys that I knew I met in Laguna, who lived out here and were building this hotel.
The Cosmopolitan.
Yes, we're building the Cosmopolitan as part of the syndicate. Rented or took over a whole floor in one of the residence building that wasn't constructed. It was still like looked like a loft, right? And they had their New Year's Eve party there.
Wow, that's
from
crazy.
2/9 to 2/10. So it was New Year's Eve 2/10 or New Year's Eve 2/9, turning to 2/10. And it was framed out, but they had it decorated really cool.
Yeah.
It kind of looked like a big open loft with metal
That's cool.
Wow. things. But to see where it is
Yeah,
today,
it's crazy
from
driving in here.
2009
I mean, it's absolutely booming.
and 2010, and today it's just crazy, you know.
Yeah. By the way, how was your flight?
I left early because we were having severe weather in Dallas, so they changed me to a 10th, so it went great. My wife is like, it's crazy. She goes, you wouldn't have got out, or at least on time.
Yeah. Were there any SBA people on your flight?
Nobody I recognized.
I had
The two guys I know that are
I had a
there,
couple.
Todd Massis are there.
in Dallas.
Yeah,
I thought he was in California for some
but
reason.
he has a ranch in north of Dallas.
Everyone's got a ranch now.
And
Except for everyone having
Mike
ranches.
Johnson, who used to be
Mike
the
Johnson.
national sales director for ReadyCap.
Oh, Johnston.
Yeah, Mike.
He was sitting there 2 hours ago.
Okay, yeah. So Mike was. I didn't see him on the flight, but I know he was over.
Okay, yeah. He was
He's
here.
a Dallas guy.
And then Jackie Bogdan was right before you.
I didn't see.
Yeah, she came. She's in Arizona, but I'm saying that's who I interviewed today. Those two, and now it's you. So
okay, good. So you got two Dallas guys.
Well,
two Texas guys.
And I knew Michael from ReadyCap.
Sure.
And Jackie, I just kind of knew I just seen her name around from Bank United. You, I crossed paths at ReadyCap.
Correct. And I must compliment you on, I think that was 215, maybe 216.
Oh, 2015?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think 2015.
So you've made quite
I've come a long way.
you've worked hard to be there.
Well,
I must compliment you, and
Oh.
I find I like to follow your career because I've never been a salesperson per se. I'm a risk guy, and I'm, yes, I know a lot about SBA, but you're on the front lines making it happen. It's guys like you.
Why didn't you ever go into sales?
I don't know. I just have always been like, I don't know, kind of like a Bob Marley thing. I like being the deputy, not the sheriff or whatever. Because he shot the sheriff, he didn't shoot the deputy.
I gotcha. You got a skill set. You got a particular set of skills. So, you're going to be able to leverage it in the positions you've been, which we're going to talk about. But yeah, no, we crossed paths at ReadyCap. I remember George Andreas, I had met at my last job.
Right.
I met him when I was like 23. When I came to ReadyCap, I was 25.
Right.
And it was me, Charlie Johnson, and Lisa Murgatroyd, and we kind of started the originations and then built up that initial.
Murgatroyd, yes.
You remember these names, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, so then we started and
is her husband at TD Bank?
Yeah.
So
I think she's there too now.
Yeah. So my wife worked with her at Arbac with Bill.
It's a small world.
Yeah.
It's a small world.
When we were up in Jersey.
Yeah. So, but we were not PLP yet. We had just acquired.
I applied for the PLP.
There you go.
For you guys.
Well, I appreciate that. It helped. But we had, they had gotten the CIT portfolio, and then. So what was your role there?
So it's an interesting story there. You guys all know Marty Techler. He's an attorney in DC that does a lot of work with the non-bank lenders, and I'd worked with him. He's kind of a counterparty to an Ethan Smith. They both.
Okay.
Plus Marty does a lot of work in the SBIC, and he always hosts the secondary market conference in Washington every year.
Right.
In December.
Yep.
So Marty and I, of course, had worked on a lot of stuff because his clients were, whether they had difficulties or were trying to deal with OCRM, navigating OCRM issues. I was coming to the end. I just finished introducing Paris and Smart, getting it approved, inventing it.
Oh, you brought in Paris. That was during your
I
tenure
designed the whole thing
at OCRM.
Yes.
Okay.
Paris and Smart.
Put a pin in that. Come back to that later.
Okay. And and then we were on the last appointee of the Obama administration. So it was the third appointee who was associate administrator, and Anne Marie Mellum, and they asked me to go and become I think it was deputy associate administrator of field operations. And so I went up to work for Eugene Cornelius and took over supervising all of the field offices, 72 field offices. And I'd wanted to me and my wife were going to migrate to go to the private sector at the end of the year. I wanted to get through, and I wanted to get the new SOP written that would be wrapped around Paris and Smart. I didn't get to do that, whatever the changes were, politics, politicals doing whatever they do, because we're up to an election.
Okay.
But I also, because of the ethics restrictions, I had to have a 2-year cooling off period. And because I was the chief regulator, I really couldn't go to work for anybody I regulated.
Yeah, you were regulating, because the only regulation of SBLCs is
and
the SBA.
And I couldn't necessarily go to a bank that had SBA lending, active SBA lending.
Right.
I couldn't go to work for any of the contractors like PwC or EMG or any. But
you're stuck. That's kind of
right. However, so after discussions with the lawyers that I met, and talking with the ethics officers, and kind enough to go up and talk to the Waterfall guys. Waterfall is actually just the manager of a fund that owns the REIT that actually bought the SBLC.
Got it.
So technically, ethics-wise, I could go to work for Waterfall.
Workaround.
Right. Well, I was lucky because I was trying to figure out was I going to go back into regular banking like FDIC, but I really was enjoying. I wanted to learn more about this SBA business, because I fell into the SBA business in late 2009 and 10 when I took over Temecula Valley Bank.
You took over Temecula. That was a big lender. A lot of people.
So I was in charge. I was the director for asset marketing for the West Coast of the FDIC, and came back to the States from Jamaica, which is where my wife was from. I had been working with the IMF and the World Bank. Got reappointed to be the director, corporate manager director for FDIC, and that position is the person that controls or administers all of the closings every Friday night. So in particular, there was an interagency agreement with FDIC and SBA, and the designee, who was a career FDIC guy, was in Dallas, but biggest SBA lenders were in California. So I was first one I took over was them.
Wait, why did that one fail?
They failed because of their real estate subsidiary situation, which then but they had such a big SBA portfolio, but it wasn't really the SBA portfolio that, was the cause. It was their construction and real estate side.
So what does that look like when you take over that type of operation?
Well, who was running the SBA group? There was Stephanie Bitters, who's here at this conference.
Oh,
she used to be with she was with Umpqua, but she was the person in charge of that. And that was their largest and most profitable division at the time. So you'll see Stephanie. She's, I think, now with Williams Adley, who's the main auditors for SBA now for Eddie Ledford.
Oh, okay.
She's the 7A. In fact, I haven't talked to her. I just saw that she was the project director for that. But anyway, you walk in on a Friday night and you got your team sitting out there, and, men in black, women in black, and descending upon Temecula Valley. And that's how I originally got into SBA. So I started working closely with the people in Dallas, because that's who the Dallas office of FDIC is, where the interagency agreement is, because that's who takes it over. And then I had to get into starting to learn about loss share, how were SBA loans going to be treated in loss share, because a lot of SBA loans that weren't taken over were then subject to loss share. So there was a lot of loss share situations that went on.
So I want to go back to
like First Citizens Bank, who now just bought CIT, but they bought part of the Temecula Valley portfolio.
If you've been a fan of the show for a while, then you know one of my favorite companies to work with is Rapid Business Plans. Last year alone, their business plans helped facilitate over $600 million in government guaranteed lending. They're on track to beat that this year. More and more small business lenders and their borrowers are relying on Rapid to help with the business plan, projections, and assumptions because their team goes the extra mile to ensure everything is done fast and done right. And that helps streamline the process. They're great at export business plans, by the way, which are critically important at protecting that 90% guarantee. Rapid also offers feasibility studies, which tells you if the project is, well, feasible. I would recommend these for any large startup loan because it protects you and it protects the borrower and helps you get more good deals done. Go to rapidbusinessplans.com to set up your Get Acquainted call today. Find out why so many top producing BDOs recommend Rapid to their small business borrowers. We're going to leave a link in the show notes just for our Art of SBA listeners. Now let's get back to the show. So that's how you got into SBA, and then fast forward, you worked in the SBA. You came out the other side. You've worked for Waterfall, which managed Ready Capital, which has the
So I because of the ethics issue and finding the what we'll call the avenue to a legitimate engagement, Waterfall was kind enough to say, well, we just hired John Mosier, and he's going to need some help. We've got some regulatory issues because we kind of floundered our first 18 months to 24 months. Would you come up? Are you willing to come up here? And I reached out to them and said, would you be interested in me helping through Marty Techler? An arrangement was managed, and I moved up there. My wife and I moved up to Hoboken, and I'd go between New Providence. And I think I started 3 months after John did. And then I started working on all their compliance, dealing with the portfolio they inherited, which had, lots of stuff.
It's like $1 billion portfolio.
Close to 2.
Was it? Wow. It was huge. Yeah. That was the CIT portfolio.
Correct. But that got me into that avenue and that venue. And then some things started to unfold. I don't know if you remember Freedom Small Business Bidco, which was part of Freedom Mortgage, which is a very large organization in South Jersey. They had a problem, and SBA wanted them to, in essence, self-liquidate, and because of some things related to the Bidco and where it was chartered. So that I was up the road there in North Jersey. This was in South Jersey by Mount Laurel, exit 4 instead of exit 13.
And New Jersey listeners.
And I went down and stepped in as the senior VP, chief credit and operating officer.
Was that an SBA operation?
Yeah, it was.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Was that a CDC or?
No, it was a 7A Bidco.
Oh,
so we have Bidcos like Penn Ritter Business Lenders was a Bidco. So we had about 22 Bidcos, which are Business Industrial Development Corporation. So in addition to the 14 SBLCs, we had about 22.
Do they still exist today?
Yes, they do. In fact, Alaska Growth Capital was a Bidco before it became before it got its 7A license.
I thought it was a CDFI.
But it also was a Bidco.
Oh, it could be both. Okay.
Right.
So a lot of the CDFIs are Bidcos?
Some are.
Okay.
And Arkansas had a Bidco. Connecticut is the only one that had an interagency relationship. So they passed some rules in 219 to start to have Bidcos stay to their state territories instead of being national territories.
So, okay.
Anyway, so that's what that was. So they closed that down, which while I was doing that, then Barry Sloan.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting to, because you worked at, he
bought BankServe, and then all of a sudden the FBI rated BankServe.
Is that why you came in there?
So then
that whole.
Yes. So Mr. Sloan called me and said, "Where you have been told that maybe I should call you, and can you go over and step in?"
So are you like the fixer? Can we brand you the fixer?
Yes, I am the fixer. That's what most everybody jokes about.
Now it all makes sense.
Ray Donovan of SBA.
Exactly. Because now you're at Velocity. So you've been at just the 3 SBLCs since leaving Okram.
Yeah, 3 SBLCs and 1 bank. which was Blue Foundry Bank, which is a $2 billion bank that I did in between Newtek and Velocity. So during COVID, I was recruited up to take a mutual bank public.
Oh,
And that's
cool.
where I went in Jersey.
Okay.
I went back up to
Yeah.
Jersey from
And that was Blue
DC.
and I saw that. But I want to stick on the SBLCs because what like it's a tough sort of thing with an SBA lender who's not a bank coming in and making SBA loans, and they're essentially regulated only by the SBA. So where do you see that they get tripped up when they're trying to
Well, all right. So
start up?
I felt somewhat there's a certain amount of I'm a Boy Scout. I'm an Eagle Scout. So as much as I, want to be a capitalist and everything, which I enjoy, that when you go in and do something in an agency, you're serving. So recognizing that I had to take over half of the SBLCs that failed during the financial crisis, 7 of the 14, maybe 8. As we repatriated the licenses, I was committed to not have them fail again.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that was, Paris and Smart and a way to have metrics and really do monitoring and oversight. But I also saw that they had unique pressures because they have different kinds of ownership and sources of capital and capitalization in a bank.
Right.
So they have to rely on the secondary market, but that means they have to have really good risk management,
Mm-hmm.
and they have to have a really good alignment of ownership, right? And so I use an analogy because when I lived in the Caribbean, I had one of the largest banks in the Caribbean that I helped merge and take over and run for almost 4 years, called Union Bank, and Union Bank Holding Company and Union Bank of Jamaica, but it was through all the islands. The hospitality industry down there is kind of interesting. There's the family-run hotels, what I'll call the small hotels. Then there's the boutique hotels, kind of like 300-400 rooms, really into the customer service experience. And then you got the mega hotels with the, wristband all inclusive.
Right.
What I found was that the family hotels struggle. The boutique luxury hotels make really good money, and they give a great experience. They pay their bills, and they got really good staff. The all inclusives, they wind up stumbling over their own scaling, and then they wind up having all kind of problems. So, and I'll say this, Newtek has gotten really big. Where they stumble is they get too big.
Do you think?
And it's hard because, and then if you're answering to a REIT, a shareholder, or some other kind of private equity, and you got to keep hitting those numbers, why not go to where the boutique hotel is and say, I make $10 million a year net profit. It's just, I got 350 rooms, or I do 350 million. You can use the number of rooms to go for the million. Why do you need to do more? If you're sitting there and you're a great business and you're consistently making that kind of money,
you have to do more every quarter. That's how it works.
Well, but I'm saying that's how they stumble, because it's not a business that you can keep doing that, particularly without a branch network. You're not like you're a bank where you got a whole branch network to support you.
Well, something's got to give somewhere. I mean, you're going to have to bend on pricing or credit.
Well, that means
quality.
You have to have a really good capital and lending structure.
Right.
So your ownership has to be thinking like a Berkshire Hathaway, not like a quarter to quarter. They have to say, are you in for steady growth to build a good business? And I don't need to necessarily monetize this. I just need to pay myself a yield.
Yeah, no, I feel like a lot of them, I mean, you just saw it. We just closed out a fiscal year where I thought there was 4. It turns out to be, I think, $3 billion 7A shops this year. ReadyCap was close, I believe. But yeah, they're just getting big. It's bigger than ever up there at the top. Do you think get to a point where some of these shops could be just too big to fail? They have some problems, but they just keep going. And like, what are you going to do?
Well, I think that I'm just going to say that that's probably a challenge for the agency. How do you apply what you need to apply for the risk management and oversight, and yet not impair the reputation of of the
agency,
agency
the program.
for its oversight.
Well, that's an interesting. Well, what I hear is that the OCRM is strapped for resources and can't actually do the job as well as they would like to.
I would say I would ask them about that, but I would just say we always were trying to strive to get 40 people, and that's back when I was managing it,
Right.
and that was only 110 billion.
Yeah,
So-
you probably need about 80 people now.
And I'll bet you there's at 45. So it's tough. And they should, in my opinion, they should be somewhat separated and have their own budget and really look, because the 7A program pays for a lot.
Well, what's the cost of the bad things that can happen if things go unregulated? What's the cost to the program? It could be,
Well, if you've got $200 billion in your
extremely high.
So start looking at what would 5% loss be on 200 billion?
Yeah, there you go. That's how you
Okay.
can kind of quantify it.
If it went really bad.
And then,
If it's high at 3%, that's still high.
right.
Given that the budget of the whole SBA is only $1 billion.
Now, I want to go back to the Paris.
Okay.
So what, just for people I don't know, like, what is the Paris report?
Well,
The Paris score?
Well, let me just give credit to Mr. John White, who was the deputy director when I got there, or had been the deputy director. They had brought in, and Steve Smits and his team are part of it, but the LLMS contract that we pay for every year. And at the time it was S&P, or no, D&B, excuse me, was the contractor.
Okay. Yep.
So they had basically around 2425 had brought in the LLMS contract, the lender loan monitoring system. And at that point it was gathering all this data. So when I got there and we were under a lot of scrutiny and pressure from the IG, OMB, everybody, to like, hey, what's going on? You guys are falling apart. We were a little lagged from the FDIC problem, but they could see there was a problem. They said, how are we going to create a new oversight process, monitoring process, like upgrade this, other than just giving you risk rating 5s, 1 to 5. That's all you had in the past. And I sat down with John White, and he explained to me what the origin of the LLMS system. Then I sat down with the economists and the mathematicians at D&B and found out all this data that they had been collecting, and said, okay, well, how would we arrange this so that SBA could be like Camel? How could we give the lenders similar to a Camel rating, but they're non-depository? So what other banking system in the country is non-depository? Well, it's the Farm Credit System, the Federal Land Bank, and the PCA. That's where I started my career. So I worked there for 10 years as a lender. And then I went over to the FCA, Farm Credit Administration, which is the regulator, and they're over in Herndon. And I met with their COO, who used to be my boss. And I said, how are you guys assigning or using a Camel-based system to rate your lenders, but they're not depository? So he hooked me up with a bunch of their, guys in their oversight, and we sat down, and they came up with, okay, here's the factors that we measure if you're non-depository. If you just have loans and you're financed by bonds, nothing from depositors, so can't really use all the depository denominators. And then I went to a conference, and I'm trying to think, the former president of NAGGL was also a lender. We sat down and we had a noodle session at an SBA conference and a NAGGL conference in Colorado. And I said, I need a name other than Camel, because I can't use Camel because like FCA uses Camel and FDIC uses Camel, and we're really an insurance company. So what would we use? So we wound up brainstorming and came up with Barbara Fortek. We came up with a name. We came up with Paris, which is portfolio performance, asset management, okay, regulatory, risk management, and special functions. And we gave each one of them 3 items like you do in CAMEL, and we took them from the metrics that we could glean out of LMS. We did a full study on the developing the standard deviation and the confidence intervals, and went through and found what we would call the base year when everything was static, which was 2005, which we could use as a statistical base. And that's how we came up with that.
Well, and it's fitting that we have the Eiffel Tower there in the background.
Right.
Oh,
So that's where an acronym came from.
Well, and the other thing was SMART. Is SMART still around?
SMART is what they use for the CDCs.
Oh, okay. That's why. Okay. So does OCRM regulate LSPs?
No. No. LSPs need to be regulated by their lender. But
that's kind of scary.
Right. And that's also what happens in banks. So what OCRM's been trying to do in SBA is take on the same approach that FDIC has done to third-party vendors. So they call them third-party vendors, and so there's a lot of now. 5 years ago, there wasn't the guidance there is now around third-party vendor management. So they've been taking, and I learned a lot more about directly what FDIC was doing when I went to the Blue Foundry Bank in 2020, because I was the chief risk officer, and all of a sudden, because we're going public, I got audited by the Fed, the SEC, the FDIC, and the state, and NASDAQ. But in that, it was almost like I felt like Kevin Costner in Bull Durham. Like, could I still hit the fastball in the regulatory area as the old guy? But it was really good because all of a sudden I saw all this attention that was going towards third-party vendors.
Yeah.
So really, it looks like FDIC's regulating them. It looks like SBA's regulating them. But what they're really saying is, you as a lender need to you need to self-regulate that, and then we're going to test what you're doing. Here's what we'd like you to look at.
Was Eddie Ledford there? Like, I'm trying to figure out who.
Eddie Ledford worked with me, and he was my right-hand guy that helped me test everything, because he knew SBA better than I did when I got there, because I could understand,
he's like a lifelong guy there, right?
Well, I think he came out of, if I remember right, he came out of the Purchase Center. Yeah, so he's been
amazing.
So
great guy.
I don't want to say he's a lifer there, but he's been there a long time. But he's
funny.
Come up.
I like him.
It's like one of the mailroom guy. Like, he started,
he's career
looking at. Yeah, he's a career guy, and he's a veteran, right?
Military.
Yes, he's a veteran, and he's got a beautiful
I did not
daughter.
Know that. Why did I not know that?
And he's a really super guy, and he spent a lot of time helping me. I couldn't have done it without him. A lot of people.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I helped design and orchestrate it, but the implementation, it's not perfect because it's a surveillance monitoring system.
Well, I think it holds up.
Perfect.
I think it actually.
Well, they're figuring out it gives them indicators as to what's happened. That's all it was really designed to do, is say, where can you find risk issues? So Eddie is taking it to it. He knows what it can be used for as a tool. He probably knows, now that we have some new contractors, they're probably going to play with the math and the algorithms. The other thing I did do with it is I set it, the way it was all set also was tied into the subsidy model, so that the metrics would come out so that we would never be subsidy negative. We'd always be subsidy neutral.
And that was a big topic in 2005.
Correct. Well, it was a bigger topic as we came out of the financial crisis, and it seems to be a big issue in the last few years, is 7A paying too much or not paying enough? And the accounting side of the agency wants to look at the OMB model, and I'm saying, but we have this model. We have all the math on the Paris side with the LLMS system that we can dial right in, and it adjusts it. So it'll when it starts to show you certain elevated metrics, because the metrics are put out by lender, by size. So there's peer groups or by size, then you can do it across the whole portfolio. So you can almost dial it to where, hey, we're seeing these issues, so we have to start to audit this or that. We have to change some things, and this is what we have to do to keep it subsidy neutral.
like, I get the subsidy. I know, I understand that that's very important for everyone in the industry, and everyone wants to be zero subsidy. But aren't we like printing like unlimited money in the government? Like, why can't the SBA just take some of that? I mean, it's going to
Well,
like,
I would pose a different structure if I might. I did a lot of work with HUD, so I'm gonna go to HUD. HUD, if you noticed HUD, it has, the Federal Housing Agency, FHA. When they have an appointee, they have a secretary, but they also have a FHA commissioner,
oh,
okay? If you really watch how the agency works and how they can support the HUD loans, they actually have an insurance company, and the commissioner can make decisions separate from the agency, because the insuring of the loan should be different than the policy. And then the insurer part should be able to say that policy is not going to work because it's going to do such and such to the insurance fund, just like FDIC works. SBA should likely create a small business insurance fund, SBIF, and appoint a commissioner of the SBIF to SBA who would work with the administrator, which also means he has the regulatory part. And instead of turning all the money into the general budget, start to pull it aside like FDIC does, and then have a reserve there so that if you do want to run subsidy neutral, the insurance company can sign off on it. Second thing, that would allow you to say, fine, you want to be a higher risk lender and you want to have more things. I'm going to charge you a different fee for your LLMS than I would
well,
the
that's
same as the bank
interesting.
does. So you can say, well, you don't get it's not one cost per $1 million for every lender. A lender can decide, I want to be a higher risk lender, but I'm going to pay a little more into the funds.
Do you think that idea has any legs to actually go into effect?
It might, but I've raised
It
it.
would take some lobbying.
Yes, you'd have to sit down and, let's say, if Elon Musk comes in, maybe he'll listen.
That's a great. I'm reading his book right now. He is hardcore.
But I'm just telling you, that would run. That
it's
would be a
interesting
way
idea.
to really show that how we make money in the SBA and how we run the agency without really using
Well,
taxpayer funds.
and it would solve the problem of one bad actor ruins it for everyone.
Correct, because it's all commingled,
Yeah, exactly.
right? So there's no real penalty. All of the good guys subsidize the bad guys.
And you'll be the commissioner? Would you do that? Would you be willing to do that?
I would help design it. That would
just kidding, Charles.
Me to
We're not gonna take
serve,
him,
I
Charles,
would
don't worry.
consider it. But
so did you ever go to conferences when you were in Oakram and people would like try to corner you and ask you questions?
all the time.
That's like part of the job, right? That's
yes. Anywhere too.
Like the bathroom, you mean?
Yes, everywhere. Everywhere. But and then my wife was pretty friendly with everybody. Then they would start cornering my wife.
Oh, that's I feel like that's crossing a line.
No, it was they didn't do it in a
malicious way.
No,
Yeah.
not at all.
So it's so funny. These 14, it was
Now
was
it's
it, 82?
7. Now
Now
it's
it's
17. But
and
14.
they want to make it like unlimited. But by the way, the agent or the industry fought back so hard on adding 3 more licenses, or any more licenses, and I was like, you know what? We all have to learn and be good stewards of the program. If somebody else gets a license, it's the same thing as a bank getting.
I think there was a lot of other factors on why the agency why the industry is pushing back. Okay. First of all, there wasn't much transparency. So when you look at who really got the licenses, 2 of them were bidcos. And so they were already lending nationally or outside their
Why give them
footprint,
licenses then?
because they changed the rules about bidcos, and it would make them easier to regulate directly from SBA as opposed to their state.
Okay.
So the state would be who regulated them.
You're giving 3 licenses. Isn't the whole point like expand access to capital? What do you want to give
But
it
they
to
really
someone?
did, and the only one that was Funding Circle, and then they turned it back.
So that was that. That sounded like that was.
So the next thing is that I don't think some of the policymakers understand the economics of how a non-bank lender has to work. So they they need to really look at the whole business model, the business plan that you have to submit, and then you can determine if you can give out a license or not. Putting a license out just because you want a mission filled doesn't mean it's going to be profitable.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, it's not all about, it's about specific missions with SBA. Minority, veteran, small loans.
Underserved communities, and that can be geographic or ethnic.
So
right?
that was a factor in when
Well, yes, but then you got to go and look at what does it really take to run a non-bank, whether
It's
you're
hard.
a fintech or whatever.
it's
Take
very
away
hard.
SBA and look at how a lot of fintechs are not profitable.
The cost of capital is so high.
Correct.
And you're using warehouse lines, you're borrowing them at like prime
plus whatever. Yeah.
It's very hard to make money.
Prime
these
plus
days.
2, prime plus 0.75.
How does the value of the licenses like fluctuate based on the market?
I don't know where it is right now, Ray. I mean, it when I first came in, it was around $1 million and $1.5 million. I seen them go for $4 million, right?
Well,
I didn't see much over 5. Now I don't know what they are.
I feel like they should be low because you can't make money in this business anymore.
Right.
It's very difficult. So, and there's the possibility that we're going to just give more licenses.
I think if I was going to throw, I guess I won't throw a number out, but I've just it has gone up and down, but it was pretty much sitting between 2 and 4 for a while. I don't know what currently things would happen.
I know. I remember a couple of them went for like 750.
Yes.
Million somewhere.
$1.5 million.
Yeah.
Well, the further we got out from the financial crisis, as we got into like 2015, 16, 17, they went up because people wanted, you had other factors where they wanted to get that non-bank.
Well, it's supply and demand too. There's more potential buyers than ever that know about the program and want in. Right, because they're in these adjacent programs.
Well, and they get that secondary market. There's not many products out there in the market where you can get that kind of premium.
Nice, but it's tough. It's a tough business. You got to manage risk. You got to be able to scale. You got the talent's tough to attract. It's a very difficult business.
Scaling is probably the hardest thing. Scaling and keeping your quality.
Right,
and then meeting all the rules that SBA has.
But having a privately owned non-bank that is well funded by Elon, maybe, is my dream. Because then you don't have publicly traded, you don't have FDIC, you just got to deal with SBA.
Well, it's like a Berkshire Hathaway kind of thing. I got one shareholder, and that person wants long-term growth, and he just wants profitability.
Long term. Let's think 5 years, not just next quarter. Like we have
10 years.
There you go.
Sir, if you really want to be mission-based, then you're there to serve, and you find your sweet spot just like a fabulous hotel, and it never goes out of business. It sits there forever because it's stayed a 400-room hotel on X number of acres, and it gives a great experience, and people come back and they bring their kids, and their kids bring their kids, and they have it's a great place.
Yeah, just focus on the program, the customer experience.
Correct.
And
reliability.
Exactly.
Consistency and reliability.
Yeah.
That's what a small business person wants. They want to go somewhere where they can count on, and they know what they don't want to see it change. They want to see it be provocative with the times, but they want that consistency, reliability.
Is that basically like because you were at FDIC, you were all over the place, and you just see these situations where, put the 08 stuff aside and put COVID aside, but like the times when something bad has happened in a bank institution, where the FDIC has to get involved, what is the core of why that occurs? Is it just greed?
Think the first...
or is it stupidity?
It's ambition without really considering the risk factors. So what happens, there's a part of it, I'll look at it this way. It's like your 20-20-60 rule or whatever, 10-10-80, but you can have 10% greed, 10% stupidity. You can have 15% greed, 15% stupidity. But that's enough to crash something, right? In the middle, there's probably best intentions. And so that's where market factors happen.
Right.
But you take something like Silicon Valley Bank that stopped hedging its treasury and fired its risk officer and then didn't want to protect itself from a potential, price increase where its bonds crashed. What was that? There you got the smartest guys in the room. So what were they trying to do? Save money? Or were they stupid?
So what would you tell like the CEO of a bank right now? Like,
Listen to your risk officer as much as you listen to your CFO.
yeah.
To me, that's the new. The bank I took public, a $2 billion bank, 29 branches up through North Jersey and such, Blue Foundry. They couldn't have gone public without the risk officer. Now, the president, CEO's sharp guy, came out of TD Bank and a number of other stuff. The CFO was a smart guy, but the risk officer had to go deal with all the regulators. Those are who sign off, and the Securities Exchange. So listen to your risk officers. They're not trying. And the other thing I like to say to my people is, if I told you I was a surfer and I'm a skier, then you'd expect me when I go onto the mountain to ski some pretty radical stuff. So I'm a risk officer and I'm pretty happy skiing some radical stuff, but I know what I'm skiing. So I don't think a risk officer that says no to everything is the best kind of risk officer. The best kind of risk officer is one that says, I can ski all the terrain. So if your question is, if I go down this terrain, what am I likely to face? Then that's the question to ask. So if the CEO, the board are convinced about looking at different terrains to go, you should be a risk officer that says, okay, we can go down that terrain, but here's what we're going to have to do in order to navigate it without hurting ourselves.
Well, and I'm going to wrap it up here, but you're with Charles at Velocity, and he's someone that's going to listen. In fact, you don't even have to worry about someone like him. He's solid. He's like,
and that's why I'm working for him, because I've watched him and, he's watched me, but he's got a good compass.
Yeah. Your job is easy. You don't even have to do anything.
Well, I won't say that, but.
So what's going on over there? What's new at Velocity?
What's new with us is we've grown like 50% this year, and we're probably going to grow 50%. We're targeting 50% next year, where we've expanded nationwide. We've now got, 3 regions. We're trying to get to a 4th region. We have folks over in your area in Florida, but we're kind of running that from the Midwest. We got a pretty active Texas South region, and we got the West region.
West Coast, yep.
We're up to 20 BDOs.
20, wow.
That's
a lot.
I've been kind of running the credit department, trying to retool and get some talent in there, while Arlene has been our chief credit officer, and she's been also working on scaling the closing department. So we're really trying to figure out, again, how do you go from a 100-room hotel to a 200-room hotel to a 300-room hotel? So that's really our mission right now. We're trying to get to the 200-room hotel, and then we're going to eye, next year 250 rooms and then 300 rooms. But I don't know if we want to get much bigger than 300 rooms. If we can do that, everyone seems to be happy. The owners are happy. We're happy. The staff's happy. There's plenty of compensation to go around, and we know we can serve every customer that comes in, and they'll enjoy the service.
We'll see when we get there, and
right.
We'll see where it goes. But I agree. In fact, when I was between jobs here, talking to some of these banks, before I came to Truliant, I talked to 2 banks that said they wanted to get into the top 10 within the next 3 to 5 years.
Okay. We just want to get in the top 25.
We're
at
there.
33.
You're right there.
When I came, we were at 57.
Yeah.
So
That's good. It's slow and steady moving up the ranks, going in the right direction, but methodically and
hopefully, and folks
measured growth.
And folks in the industry are, they know me as a regulator guy, but it's kind of interesting now to actually build a practice, and that's because of Charles. He's got talents I don't have, and hopefully I have some talent. So together we're doing well, and we got a solid credit person in Arlene.
Awesome. Well, we've shut it down here. Okay. It's gotten dark, so I think we'll call it. But thank you so much for joining the pod.
Thank you, Ray. Thanks for having me.
That was
Appreciate it. Yes.
All right, that's it for this week's episode. If you want more SBA content, you can sign up for our monthly newsletter and check out our sister shows, SBA Today and The BDO Show. We'll leave a link in the show notes. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast so you never miss an episode of The Art of SBA Lending. Ta-ta.